Hey there, coin collectors and history buffs, welcome back to my channel Coin Purchaser. Today, we're diving deep into the fascinating world of the United States 1-cent coin, also known as the penny, specifically the pennies minted from 1975 to 1978. These years might not seem like a huge deal on the surface, but trust me, there's so much more than meets the eye. We'll take a look at the history behind these coins, the significance of each year, how they were minted, and what they're worth in today's market. So grab your magnifying glass and let's get started. 1 Segment 1 Footage of a 1975 penny, 1976 penny, 1977 penny, and 1978 penny. One by one. First, let's take a step back and look at the historical context behind the years 1975 to 1978. These were interesting years in American history, and the coins minted during this period reflect both economic and cultural moments of that time. Starting in 1975, we were in the midst of the 1970s, a decade marked by significant social change, economic uncertainty, and political events. It's important to understand that the design of the penny, the famous Lincoln Memorial design, had been in use since 1959. However, by the mid-70s, there was a push from various sectors to change the look of the currency. But before we dive into that, let's examine each year's coin production and significance. 1975 penny. In 1975, the U.S. Mint produced 1-cent coins featuring Abraham Lincoln's image on the obverse front with the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse back. This design had been in circulation for nearly 2 decades by this point. The penny's composition in 1975 was primarily 95% copper and 5% zinc. What's interesting about the 1975 penny is that the year 1975 is often associated with the bicentennial of the United States. But we'll talk about the bicentennial penny in a moment. t.g.reg.f.d. 1976 penny. The 1976 penny was similar in design to the 1975 penny. However, 1976 was a monumental year for the United States because it marked the 200th anniversary of the country's independence, the bicentennial. To celebrate this historical occasion, a special reverse design was introduced for certain coins, including the quarter, half dollar, and dollar. However, the penny retained the same Lincoln Memorial reverse as 1975, since the U.S. Mint didn't opt for a bicentennial-themed penny. This small decision actually adds a layer of rarity to some coins minted in 1976. For 1977 penny, the 1977 penny was essentially a continuation of the design we saw in 1975 and 1976. The same obverse and reverse were used, with no major changes. However, one important thing to note about the 1977 penny is that the economic conditions during this period were challenging, with inflation rates rising and the country in the midst of a financial struggle. These pennies were also composed of copper and zinc. 1978 penny. The 1978 penny was very similar to the 1977 penny. By this time, the U.S. Mint had solidified its production methods and designs, and the pennies from this year continued to use the same Lincoln Memorial design on the reverse. However, 1978 marked the final year of the full copper penny production before the Mint started making changes to the coin's composition in the early 1980s, a change that would eventually affect the value of these coins. Segment 2. Minting process and key features of 1975 to 1978 pennies. Now let's talk about the minting process and the key features of the pennies from 1975 to 1978. The U.S. Mint produced these coins in large quantities, and most of them were struck at two major facilities, the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint. Both facilities produced billions of these pennies, and the coins are readily available today. Each penny from this period has the iconic Lincoln Memorial reverse. Abraham Lincoln's portrait on the obverse was designed by Victor David Brenner and has remained unchanged since 1909, making it one of the longest-running coin designs in U.S. history. The reverse design features the Lincoln Memorial, which was introduced in 1959 and stayed in use until 2008. This particular design was chosen to symbolize the legacy of Lincoln's leadership and his connection to the nation's history. As mentioned earlier, the coins were primarily made of copper, with a small amount of zinc. These coins were heavier than later pennies, which is one reason they are sought after by collectors today, but more on that in a moment. Segment 3. Current market value of 1975 to 1978 pennies. Now let's get to the good stuff, the value of these pennies today. The truth is, the value of a penny is often less than its face value, except in rare cases where certain minting errors, special features, or high-grade coins are involved. So, let's break down how much these 1975, 1976, 1977, and 1978 pennies are worth today. 1 1975 penny value. For the 1975 penny, most of them are still worth just 1 cent in average circulated condition. However, if you have a coin in pristine, uncirculated condition, it could be worth a little more, perhaps 10 to 15 cents. However, if you're lucky enough to have a 1975 penny with a double die error, you're in for a treat. A 1975 double die penny could fetch hundreds of dollars, depending on the quality and degree of the doubling. 2 1976 penny value. The 1976 penny is quite common, with the majority of them being worth just 1 cent. However, some collectors search for high-quality uncirculated versions, which could be worth a bit more, around 5 to 10 cents, depending on condition. If you happen to find a 1976 penny with a minting error, it could be worth more, but generally, they remain low in value. t.g.r. 1977 penny value. The 1977 penny is similarly common, with most of them still only worth their face value, 1 cent. A nice uncirculated version could go for 10 to 15 cents, but it's not likely to fetch a lot of money. The key for coin collectors is finding well-preserved examples of these coins, especially if they have unique characteristics. For 1978 penny value. The 1978 penny is also fairly common, and unless it's an error coin or in superb condition, it's generally worth just its face value. Coins in mint state, uncirculated condition, can be worth between 10 to 20 cents. Like the other years, if you come across a 1978 penny with a minting error, it could increase its value substantially. Special cases, coins that are in proof condition, those specially minted for collectors, are worth more. For example, a 1975 or 1976 proof penny might be valued at $2 to $5, depending on the quality and the rarity of the proof set. Segment 4. How to identify rare coins and collecting tips. Now that you know the basics of how much these coins are worth, let's talk about how you can identify rare or valuable pennies and tips for starting or enhancing your coin collection. First, always check the condition of the coin. A well-preserved coin can be worth much more than one that's worn or damaged. Look for signs of wear on the raised areas, like the Lincoln Memorial and Abraham Lincoln's portrait. Next, Check for minting errors. Some of the most common errors on pennies are double dies, where part of the design is struck more than once, creating a double image. These errors can make a coin much more valuable. To spot these, use a magnifying glass or a jeweler's loupe. Pay close attention to the date and other key areas of the design. Finally, when you're building your collection, focus on finding coins that are in uncirculated condition, as they are more likely to increase in value over time. Alright, coin enthusiasts, that's all for today's deep dive into the 1975, 1976, 1977, and 1978 US 1-cent coins. As you can see, while most of these pennies are worth only a few cents in today's market, there's always the possibility of finding rare or special coins that can fetch a significant amount. Thanks for tuning in, and be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more coin-related content. Let me know in the comments if you've found any rare pennies, or if you've come across any minting errors yourself. Until next time, happy collecting!